Ugh, I've had a lot of caffeine this morning. Did I necessarily need all the caffeine? Not really, no. Also, I'm in a sweatshirt and it's like 90 degrees outside. Excuse my caffeine ramblings. Like, do I really need more caffeine? But it tastes so good. Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to Beautifully Broken. So today, we are I've had so much caffeine, oh my god. Okay. Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to Beautifully Broken. So today, we're going to be talking about anxiety. Yes, beloved anxiety. The irony today is that I've had 2 cups of coffee. Anxiety is something a lot of us struggle with. I myself struggle with anxiety all the time. However, it's gotten a lot better for me. And in this video, I'm basically going to be going over my experience with anxiety, how it's shown up for me, and what I've been doing to mitigate it and understand it a little better so it's not completely taking control of my everyday life. If you're new here, my name is Sabby. Hello, welcome. This is a platform I started to help heal my own mental health and in turn, help other people heal and feel less alone in their journey. I give tips, tools, knowledge, and guidance based on my own experiences. And in turn, I hope that it helps you on your journey. I also have a podcast called Proper Madness. It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please be sure to go check that out. I interview so many amazing people from around the world, and one of their stories may resonate with you and help you get the help that you may need. And just a normal disclaimer, I'm not a licensed professional or a therapist or psychologist, so before you take any of my advice, please be sure to go and reach out to someone first. Grab your tea, grab your coffee, grab whatever beverage you would like to drink today, and relax and sit down, and we'll get into the video. Beloved anxiety. You know, anxiety and I have had a very complicated relationship over the course of the last 30 years of my life. When I was younger, I never used to be super anxious, actually, especially as a kid. I'd say ages like 5 to maybe like 10 or 11. I was a weird kid, I was very eccentric, and even then, as a kid, I don't think anxiety really ever affected me. I think I'd be concerned with what other people thought about me to an extent, but it wasn't to the extent where I would have constant chatter in my head of anxious thoughts. When my more prominent traumas started taking place in my youth, that is when have you seen New Girls? You know when Schmidt's like youths. Every time I use the word youth, that is what I think of. Yeah, I know, I'm super weird, but this is why you're here, and hopefully this is why you're subscribed. Also, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Join the Beautiful Friends community. So I would say when my more prominent trauma started happening in my life, as well as puberty and hormones, that is when anxiety started really manifesting for me in everything. Social anxiety, speaking in public, public speaking, if I had to give a presentation for any class, like the amount of anxiety that I would have would literally cripple me. And anytime I would, I'd kind of like black out in my brain right before I'd go and do it. And then as I got older, my anxiety stayed the same, but it got worse because I was more aware of other people and how they respond to things and situations. And then because I had been through so much trauma growing up, on and off, it made me more hyper aware and vigilant of so much more around me. I remember when I was younger, even in college, like we'd go to the beach all the time, me and my friends, and I would just go dive in the ocean and like not give a crap, you know, I just like whatever. I'm swimming in the ocean, and I wouldn't have anxiety about those sorts of things. But as I got older, my anxiety changed. Now, I don't think I'd step foot in the ocean and dive. I'd have so much anxiety about like sharks, I don't know, jellyfish, drowning. I mean, but I was on my swim team when I was younger, so like, why would that be something I'm anxious about? You get the point. As I evolved, my anxiety evolved, and in turn, I had different things to be anxious about. I think when we're younger and we have anxiety, it's not nearly as crippling, I want to say, as it is when you become an adult. Because when you become an adult, there's so many other responsibilities that you have, and there are certain ways that you need to show up for yourself, other people, your job, what have you, that it can inhibit you from living the life that you want to live. I would have anxiety about anxiety, and I didn't like that. I didn't like that, alone by myself within my own thoughts. And if I'm just hanging out alone, having a good time, I think I'm the coolest person ever. But then the second I step out into the world, all of a sudden I feel like I become smaller. Anxiety makes me feel like I'm shrinking, and like I need to be small so that I'm not seen. So my anxiety comes from being seen. I get anxious if people notice me, but then at the same time, if they don't notice me, I get anxious and I'm like, well, how come they're not noticing me? It's a really weird juxtaposition. My anxiety shows up as social anxiety. It shows up as actually body dysmorphia. It shows up as anxious thoughts then turning into depression, because what will happen for me is, and I went to a psychiatrist a long time ago, and this is when I was first really trying to understand if I need to be put on medication, and I'm not against medication in any way, just for me personally, it wasn't something I wanted to do. But I remember her asking me if my anxious thoughts came first before my depression, or if I was depressed and then I became anxious. And I told her, no, my anxious thoughts make me feel more depressed, because my anxious thoughts are like this really mean bully inside of my head. And if you've seen my negative self-talk video, then you know what I'm talking about. So the negative self-talk that I had in my head was formed from my anxiety, and then that would lead to my depression. So I'd have these intrusive, anxious what-if thoughts constantly, and then I would spiral downwards even further. So, I mean, if you think about it, I had like a negative inner critic 24/7, I had anxiety, and then I had depression. The combination of the three just really stopped me from feeling alive and appreciating everything around me. When I get anxious, physically how it shows up for me is always very different. I'm either overtly chatty and nervous, and I say things that like I really don't mean to say, and nothing bad, it's just kind of like verbal diarrhea, or it's the opposite. I just kind of clam up, and I don't know what to say. Like I feel like I don't have a voice, or the very common, like my heart starts beating faster, my palms get sweaty. Okay, this is not an Eminem song, we're not talking about spaghetti, but then at that point it also becomes this very ugly thing where my anxiety makes me assume the worst of everyone and every situation. It's almost like a form of hypervigilance, where I feel like I need to be anxious in order to predict what's going to happen at every turn and point, which then leads me into overthinking. Overthinking for me is the biggest trait of anxiety, as well as taking things way too personally. My anxiety does make me do that as well, where if someone acts a little bit different, it makes me really, really anxious. Some of my triggers with anxiety are, and they're very dependent on the traumas that you've been through. So your triggers may not be the same as mine, but my anxiety gets triggered when I go to new places. If I'm talking to a new person that I've never spoken to in my life before, example, Say I'm at the gym and I have a new friend and they come up to me and they start asking me about my weekend for some damn reason. I will start getting nervous about about talking to them and just being myself. I'll get a little bit of anxiety with how I'm coming across and how I'm saying things, but it's not like I'm consciously aware of it, it just kind of happens. I would say if I'm in a relationship or I'm dating someone, I do have an anxious attachment type. I have both. I have anxious and avoidant, unfortunately. But my anxious attachment type will come up, meaning if someone doesn't text me back right away, or they leave me on read, or I notice that they're very warm with me and then all of a sudden they're very cold, that gives me a bunch of anxiety. If someone's consistent with their behavior, then all of a sudden their behavior gets really weird, that gives me anxiety. Conflict used to give me anxiety. So I was largely a people pleaser because I didn't want to feel anxious all the time. And then drinking gave me anxiety. Like the next day I would, oh Lord, I would, if I went out drinking with friends, and this was before I got a handle on my substance abuse and the way, and my relationship with substances. Say I just drink like a little bit too much, maybe like I didn't get blacked out, but like I'm a little overboard. The next day, I'd be anxious about what I said, how I came across, what happened, did I push anyone away, did I do anything weird, like just constant anxiety. And that's for a couple of reasons, you know, like the sugars and alcohol do make you anxious the next day. And then secondly, because I've had a history of substance abuse, I'm very hyper aware of how I come across because I lost a lot of people when that was something that, you know, was a part of my life, unfortunately, for a long time. So, they're very normal reasons for me to get anxious, but when anxiety comes into our lives or comes into our behaviors and shows up, it almost feels like we're out of control and we're out of the driver's seat and anxiety has taken over and like we black out for a second. You're like, what just happened? Why did I get anxious? I have this weird thing that when I get anxious, consciously I am aware in the moment that I am feeling anxious. Subconsciously, it's like, I'm going, whoa, but like, why am I anxious? There's no reason for me to be anxious right now. What's happening? For me, when anxiety comes up, I don't just see anxiety as a mental illness, I see it as an emotion, you know, because that's essentially, to me, that's what I think most mental illnesses are to an extent, are just like very heightened emotions. And the emotions have grown and evolved so much, they become an illness because we haven't dealt with the root cause of it. Like when you get sick and you feel that tickle in the back of your throat, you don't go, all right, let me go hit the town and get no sleep, because, well, you know what's going to happen? The next day you're going to get like a full-blown cold. Instead of dealing with it and treating it at the time so it doesn't get worse. Our emotions are the same. When you feel the emotion coming up, the more we try to avoid it, and the more we try to run away from it, the worse it's going to get. And I know I've said that so many times. But with anxiety especially, how I manage it is I understand why it's happening. I go, okay, I'm feeling anxious. I just accept the fact that I'm feeling anxious. Anxiety for me is like an overprotective parent. So when anxiety shows up, I kind of sit there with it and I go, all right, why are we feeling anxious? Like what's going on? What are we anxious about? And I look at the situation and I try to kind of pick it apart. And this is actually where your anxiety and that inner dialogue can come in handy. You know, I think we think that anxiety is super scary all the time because it makes us feel scared. It makes us feel crazy. It makes us feel like this overwhelming surge of just what the hell is going on? I want this to stop. But if you stop and you get familiar with it, you'll understand that it's just there to protect you. Stop and I go, okay, whoa, am I in danger? No. Is going to this place going to cause me harm physically or emotionally? No. If I show up to this place and something does happen, you know, because anxiety, like, well, what if something does? If something does happen, can I handle it? And anxiety will kind of try to trick you and be like, no, you can't handle it. That's why I'm here and why we should completely avoid the situation. But that's not a way to live your life. So, I will tell anxiety, hey, I got this. If something is going to happen there, to me physically or emotionally, I can handle it and I'll be fine. I know that most of my videos are kind of repetitive in like the method that I address my emotions, but that's just what works for me. Is I truly try to have a dialogue with whatever is going on with my emotions at that time. And anxiety is a form of control, you know, like anytime I hear any of my friends say that they're struggling with anxiety, mentally I'm just like, oh, it's because you want to be in control. If we have anxiety, it's because we're scared of not being in control of whatever it might be, whatever circumstance it might be that we want to control. For me personally, I'm a planner because I can't ever be, quote, super spontaneous. I can be spontaneous to a degree, but I have to plan almost everything because it makes me feel safe. And if someone's really spontaneous and they're like, oh, I'll just show up whenever, I'll just do this whenever, that gives me anxiety because of what I've been through. My relationship anxiety stems from not being in great relationships, unfortunately, with people who are very much unhealed. My social anxiety comes from being bullied for half my life and dealing with emotional abuse. And then I'd say my anxiety of being in a new situation or a new environment is out of fear of embarrassment and what people think of me, obviously because of being bullied and being held under a microscope my entire life. So you gotta understand why your anxiety's there and why it shows up. I think if we understand the backstory of why we feel certain emotions and why they show up and where they're coming from, it's a lot easier to understand it. So that way when anxiety shows up again, you can be like, oh, hey, what's up? You know, you want to treat anxiety like it's an overprotective parent. At least for me personally, trying to prevent you from experiencing any pain emotionally or physically that you have experienced before. So if we're in a certain similar situation that we've been through, it may not be identical, but if it looks very, very similar, then anxiety is going to pop up and be like, oh, I remember this. Okay, let me give you all this adrenaline as a way to signal your body that you're in danger, and then raise your cortisol levels and make you super hyper vigilant. So that way we're always prepared just in case something happens. And if you think about it, that's exhausting. You know, it's exhausting that your body is in a constant fight or flight mode, which is what anxiety is from a health standpoint. And that your hormone cortisol, which is a stress hormone, goes up. So just so you're prepared for whatever happens. And then that's obviously where the overthinking comes in. And I will be doing a podcast on overthinking this Friday and how I deal with my overthinking and how it shows up for me and how I've been able to overcome it. But essentially, I've been able to overcome my anxiety because anytime it shows up now, I address it and I talk to it and I reassure it like, hey, we're gonna be okay. You aren't gonna be able to control every possible scenario that's gonna show up. Half the time when you do have anxiety, probably, there's scenarios that never actually happen. You know, like your brain will start to really overanalyze every single part of it, but none of it ever happens, none of it ends up being true. There's no quick fix for curing your anxiety. It's practice. You know, with everything that we do in our lives, if we want to get good at it and we want to master it, we have to practice. It's the same with our emotions. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope this made sense and I hope it helped. Please feel free to comment below any ways that you struggle with your anxiety, how you understand it, where it comes from, and how you manage and deal with it. Please be sure to subscribe and like this video. It lets me know that you like what I'm doing. And other than that, I will see you guys Friday for a Proper Madness episode on overthinking. And remember, you have to get through the eye of the storm to see the clear day ahead. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next time.